Welcome to J&J's Retro and Repairs. In today's video, we're going to continue with the conversion of the Commodore 64 that's right behind me into a ZIF64. In the previous video, we actually looked at what was wrong with the actual Commodore 64 to see what we could fix. We figured out that it was a PLA that had gone bad, and replacing the PLA got the Commodore 64 to start again. In this video, we are going to now move forward and continue replacing chips and sockets with more ZIF sockets. Creating a ZIF64 can be a painstaking process, which means we need to change out each chip or socket one at a time so that we can narrow the possibility of failure. I will try to either speed up or jump over the areas which are the most boring and continue on and make it a little bit more interesting. For this particular video, I will be doing the SID socket, replacing that. Right now it's already a socket, but I'm going to take the socket out and replace it with a ZIF socket that's easy to remove chips, put chips into and remove chips out of. Now, also in this particular video, I would like to bring out the fact that I really appreciate both WM and Nordischsound that have actually helped in providing the music for this video and for all of the continuation of the videos in the future. So, let's get started. So we're going to get started, and we're going to be working on this computer. This will be mostly unscripted, and I'll just take it apart and continue to replace all of the sockets one at a time. Then we'll test it in between. So the first thing we're going to try and do here is to remove this socket off the board. So let's get started. You will notice that I already took the two ICs out of the board that we already fixed and replaced. Now we want to get to the next ones, which is this one right here. So now we check our job to see how we did, and flipping it over we can just check this and see how loose. Oh, it's very loose. You see that? It's just holding on one side only now. Just this side is holding on. So we just need to find out which pin it is and desolder that one. Finally, got it out. Oh, wait. Maybe I did get it out. Ha ha ha! I am wrong. As you can see, that pin was still in there. It fell out now. Oh, it is. You can quite clearly see that one of the pins is missing there. If you look at that. We wanted to put this in here. But what I discovered was that the socket doesn't fit here because there's a capacitor sitting right there. You can see the capacitor sitting right there. That capacitor is in the way of being able to put the socket in properly. So that leaves me no choice but to take that capacitor and do the same thing we did here, which is to lift it off the board and put some wires on it so that we can put the socket in place. So I'll do that same thing right here. Want to inspect to make sure that none of the traces or the pads are damaged. That's something that we have to watch out for, because if any of them are damaged, then I'll need to repair them as well. But as far as I can see, everything looks good. Yeah, so my cat decided she wanted to interrupt my soldering event and come and climb up into my arms, and so now she is, yeah, she has taken over. So I'm going to have to take a pause for a little while I attend to the cat. She seems to have wanted to climb up into my arms. So what we're doing here is we're going to solder the wires on using this. This is kind of a neat little tool that you can use to hold on to components while you solder to them. In this case, I will be putting a little solder on the wire itself. Once you have your capacitor all ready and soldered together, it doesn't have to be super pretty as long as it's strong. Then you can put the heat shrink tubing over it and prepare for soldering it to the board. These particular capacitors are not polarized, so I can put this in any way I want, but just to be sure, just to know that the ground is on the left-hand side. So to hope to keep this doing a little bit better, I think I'm going to try and see if I can tape this down to the board and keep it in place while I solder. So with the Kapton tape on there, or the Chinese equivalent of Kapton tape anyway, I'm not exactly sure what that stuff is, but it's enough to hold that for now until I do the soldering. Some of you are probably screaming at me in your screen saying, well, why didn't he put the heat shrink on? I'm like, yep, that was a blunder. So let's start over. So after getting out again, this time let's put the heat shrink tubing on before we put it on the board. That would be wise. So, I just need to make sure that I desolder those holes because they're full of so much solder now I can't even get at anything. So I'll be using the desoldering iron. With the holes desoldered now, I can actually get the capacitor back in. And let's try round 2. A little more of this Chinese version of kept on tape, and let's try a second time. See if we can do this. I think that actually turned out better than last time. So that means now we have our capacitor moved out of the way. We should try to get our socket into the board. And we'll try to put that down. I did bend this particular socket, the post, a little bit because otherwise it would hit the post above it. I may move the capacitor in the other direction. I'd intended on moving it that way, but in hindsight it's better if I move it this way because the post is on the left hand side, so if I move the capacitor to the right then it will not hit the post. And there, just like that. With the capacitor already in the board and all the leads heat shrinked, I didn't want to put too much heat on this because there's a socket right behind it, so I didn't want to melt that socket. So I kind of went light on the heat on this one, but just enough to tighten that around the leads, keep them tight so that they're not going to slip off. This will at least make it so I can move this capacitor where I need to, and I can kind of bend the leads back as far as possible so that I can make the room for the socket. Before I put the socket in place though, I do need to clean this spot a little bit. I think I got a little bit lucky with removing the previous socket because I had used deoxit in that socket previously, and so somehow I think the deoxit oils must have helped when I was desoldering the socket, which might be like a bit of a life hack for being able to get sockets out without creating a huge mess or making a huge stink. It didn't smell a lot. I smelt a little bit of plastic and that's it. The socket is surprisingly in good shape considering that I just desoldered out of the board, and it didn't seem like there was any melting on the actual pins or in the actual socket. So although those are cheap Commodore sockets that were put in place from the very, very beginning at the factory, they're probably not that great because they're single wipe sockets, but nonetheless preserved. So if someone wants an original socket, they can have it. So there you go. So now time to do some cleaning. Since we previously did some work on this board, I think I'm going to clean all of this. And now it's time to install the socket. So I think the heat shrink may actually be getting in the way. So to fix this, we need to cut away a little bit of the heat shrink, I think. It's mostly the black side, the ground side heat shrink, but I'll just cut away at the heat shrink until I have enough removed that it's no longer causing trouble for the socket going down. If I still can't seem to get it to work, even with all of those changes in place, best thing I can do then is just forget this and move the capacitor to the bottom of the board, which is my last resort. Now that we have everything in place and everything's soldered, I'll let the cap back in place and everything's soldered. Now it's time to solder to the board the new sockets. The new socket. Now that I have everything in place tight enough, I'm not too concerned. I can continue soldering without any assistance. Just need to elevate the board slightly so that I do not, I won't be resting on the post. And there we are. We have the socket completely installed. And we are ready to test the chip in the board to see if it's still working. You can see that it's definitely in the board properly, and it does barely clear the socket above it. It's a little bit hard to get it down and up again. So I may need to work on that. It does seem to be a little bit of a problem getting it down and up. So I will have to work on that. It tends to overshoot the socket a bit, but that would cover the installation of the socket for the 6581. The SID chip actually is what it's called, because there's also the 8580 version as well as the 6581. But in this particular board, it is a 6581 that we are using, because this is the longboard early model. This is not the 64C, which would use the 8580. Well, at least most of them would anyway. And that's it. So I think we can move along. I do want to be careful here, so I'm going to off screen. I'm going to check all of the connections to make sure that there's continuity all the way from the top to the bottom, and make sure that we have a good connection and no shorts. So I'll do all of that off camera, and then I will come back and we can do a test. So now that I've tested everything and everything looks good, time for us to put our IC chips back in and see how they work. The ARM SID will be in the SID socket, and the PLA in its socket. Make sure it's in the right way. There we go. Well, let's do the fire test. Nothing exploded. That's a good sign. And I guess we should see if there's any video out. I'll just black screen. That's not good. Let's try that again. Let's see what we get. Nice and secure in the sockets. Let's try this, reseating this. Make sure that the pins look good. Well, let's try a dead test. Well, let's try it without the arm and see if it works. Voltage check. Volts, 5 volts. Power looks good. See if the CPU is it getting hot. Oh, the CPU is getting warm. PLA is getting warm. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing exceptional. Seems to be heating up. Interesting. It turns out that not every time that you work on these old machines, everything goes as planned. In this video, we ended up running into a situation where it wouldn't start. And all we got was a black screen. Nothing seemed to work. So in the next video, we will have to do some troubleshooting and figure out what really went wrong with this particular board. Maybe we'll break out the oscilloscope. Maybe we'll just do some testing, continuity testing. I quite suspect that in the process of removing and reinstalling the new ZIF socket, we lifted a trace or broke a trace somewhere. So first thing will be validating that the continuity on the lines is correct. The other thing will be validating that all of the signals are getting to where they need to get to. That being said, I mean, things don't always work out. Not every video is going to be a perfect, we made it, we did it, we won it. So this particular video will just be going to have to be a fact that we failed in one particular way or another. And that's fine. Like, you don't always win. Sometimes you do end up with failures, and that's okay. The point is, get up, keep going, keep testing. So the next video, when it comes out, will be a test video on how do you troubleshoot a Commodore 64 when things do go wrong, because they will. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you liked my video, please leave a comment down. Even if you didn't like my video, put a thumbs down and put a comment down below and tell me how I could have done things better. Either way, have a very good day, and I hope to see you in the next video.